So the specific topic today is the origins of the modern phenomena of illicit cocaine, which is in many ways a hidden chapter in the history of globalization. Cocaine is a drug commodity which virtually everyone knows a little bit about, which exploded into a huge global criminal enterprise during the 1970s and 1980s. It was associated in the public imagination with kind of infamous Colombian cartels and legendary bad guys like Pablo Escobar. It's a drug that, in the United States at least, had blighting social consequences, especially with 1980s crack cocaine, and which ignited a costly and still ongoing war on drugs against the Andes. Again, a topic that most people are probably vaguely familiar with. But despite this kind of notoriety of cocaine in the public imagination, we really have no idea of who or what forces invented or organized this notorious trade in the first place. Now, to want to just elevate this puzzle just a little bit, the puzzle of who or what actually invented modern cocaine conceals what historians would conceive of as a specific historiographical problem or gap in the history of drugs. So the history of drugs is almost an entirely new field, so it feels a little peculiar to talk about gaps in the historiography. There's not much written about the history of drugs at all in any case. But the gap that I'm talking about is this. Prior to the end of World War II, there is no evidence of any organized or transnational traffic in cocaine, which is a little bit different from the sister drug heroin. And despite the fact that, in fact, cocaine had long been around, at least from the end of the 19th century, and that people knew about cocaine's recreational uses or potential. And prior to 1973, and that's a date that is good to remember during this talk, Colombians, that is, from the country that is mythically and sensationally associated with cocaine today, evinced no interest whatsoever in the drug. So that said, what the specific gap that needs to be filled in or explained is cocaine's construction as an illicit international drug in the period 1945 to 1973, or to put it in other terms, during the first half of the Cold War in Latin America. And this is the period, just to give you a little sneak preview today, when a new class of traffickers was born, composed of hundreds, maybe even thousands of traffickers, Peruvians, Bolivians, and compatriots from Chile, Cuba, and across the Americas, and for the most part kind of small-time operators, very modest drug traders. And these were actors who came together to build new corridors of drugs north, which for the first time systematically linked the coca-growing peasants of the Andes through chemists and smugglers to a new kind of a newfangled type of cocaine lover in the United States. And these were groups that I discovered and tried to make sense of from hundreds of declassified documents that were liberated from the DEA, which in the United States is the drug enforcement agency, the major anti-drug bureaucracy, during the course of writing this new global history of Andean cocaine. Okay, so apart from sketching these new illicit circuits or actors or the geography of cocaine in the post-war era, I want to make two larger analytical points about the birth of this pre-Columbian class, points that may have some political implications, perhaps even today. First, the rise and dispersion of cocaine was in large part a reaction to, or in the shadow of, U.S. actions in the post-war era to complete a global prohibitions regime around cocaine. That is, prior to the 1940s, cocaine still had a lot of legal spaces. Even here in the Netherlands had a role to play in cocaine's history, as we talked about yesterday. But especially in the Andes, areas that were then closed and repressed with illicit consequences. And secondly, and what was more surprising to me, is the shifting geography or opportunities for drugs were part of the political map of the Cold War in Latin America, tensions and pressures that were also exported by the United States in the region after World War II. So apart from some hidden and energetic roles of very colorful South American empresarios, the construction of modern cocaine was closely linked to North American policies and practices in Latin America, which is to say, in other words, that drugs are a very transnational phenomena. Okay, so in any case, just to give you outline what I want to do here, today's talk is going to be in two parts. The first, I'm going to give you this kind of descriptive tour of the emerging cocaine networks and geographies from the 1940s through the 1970s. And then I'll step back and I want to do this kind of two-track analysis of the patterns that were found in the geography of cocaine as it emerged. And in terms of geography, we'll be starting with Peru, which is the birthplace of illicit cocaine in the late 1940s. And then I'll move on to some of the Pan-American cocaine corridors north through the 1950s and 1960s. And I want to end on Bolivia, which in the 1960s, by the 1960s at least, became the incubator of a new and kind of dynamic form of popular cocaine capitalism in the Americas.